Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking on a really fascinating shift, actually, in the airline market. You've probably seen some headlines, about the sector taking flight. Well, we want to unpack what's really driving all this sudden optimism. What really stood out to me was how Delta Airlines gave this surprisingly strong outlook for the second half of the year. And that just sent these positive ripples, across the whole industry. I mean, even Southwest Airlines shares, for instance, they jumped up 7% just after Delta reported. Kind of makes you wonder, right? What exactly is feeding all this enthusiasm?
Yeah, and that's where we really need to dig in a bit. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it's important to remember all the investor uncertainty we've seen. There's been this cloud hanging over things, inflation worries, tariffs.
Sure.
Investors were nervous about spending.
Right, holding back a bit.
Exactly. But then Delta, and they're usually the first major U.S. carrier to report, right?
Yeah.
They didn't just beat the Wall Street estimates. They actually reinstated their full-year guidance.
Oh, okay. That's pretty significant.
It's huge. It basically signals they're confident enough to map out their finances for the rest of the year. It suggests demand is holding up much better than maybe people feared, even with those wider economic pressures. And that gave investors the confidence to, jump back in, betting on other airlines to set the whole sector up. So our mission for you today is not just to look at that immediate surge, but to really get into the nuances, the signals under the surface.
Yeah.
Especially for a company like Southwest, which is,
This is a great point because, this rising tide seems to lift all boats, but Southwest is fundamentally different from Delta, isn't it? Delta's got that big premium focus, international routes.
Precisely.
So what does this market buzz actually mean for Southwest specifically, given its, unique history and business model?
You've hit exactly where the deeper analysis needs to happen. Even though they're riding this general wave, our sources really flag some unique things for Southwest investors to think about. I mean, for decades, Southwest built this incredibly loyal following on a very clear promise. No frills, high value, transparency.
Bags fly free, no change fees, that whole simple, predictable thing.
Exactly. Simple, predictable, value-focused, point-to-point flying. But now, Southwest is in the early phases of a pretty major transformation. They're starting to get rid of some of those long-standing perks, like the famous free bags.
Wow. That's foundational to their brand.
It really is. It's not just about adding a fee. It challenges the core identity they've spent decades building. And this brings up a big question. Can they actually pivot, maybe appeal to different customers without losing that core group, the ones who chose them because of those perks? There's definitely potential for some consumer backlash here. It's a high-stakes move strategically.
It feels like a huge shift. And it makes me think about something else you mentioned from the sources about Delta. You said, well, Delta's overall demand looked strong. Their main cabin, like economy seats, that was weaker than premium and business.
That's right. A noticeable difference.
Okay, so if Southwest has historically relied so heavily on that, no-frills, main cabin kind of traveler, does this maybe point to a sort of two-speed recovery in the industry? Could that spell trouble for Southwest down the road?
Precisely. That's the nuance hiding behind the big headlines, isn't it? The top-line industry numbers look good, yeah, but that Delta data suggests demand is segmented. If premium and business are flying high, but the more price-sensitive traditional economy flyer is pulling back, maybe because of inflation, then an airline like Southwest, which hasn't really played in that premium space, could face some unique headwinds. They're trying to move up market, in a way, by taking away perks, but if their traditional customer base is shrinking or getting even more cost-conscious, it's a tricky balancing act.
So, okay, what this really boils down to for you, listening in, is that, the tide might be rising for the whole airline sector, but you absolutely have to look closely at the individual currents, the specific strategies for each airline.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's about understanding how a specific company's model, its history, its customer base, how all that fits into this changing landscape. You can't just ride the general market wave.
Which leaves us with something interesting for you to think about. As airlines like Southwest start changing these long-standing perks they were known for, how might that fundamentally shift what consumers expect, their loyalty? And what does that really mean for Southwest's place in the market, their competitive edge in the long run?